Because of the age of our plumbing and the age of our hot water tank, we're having to replace all of our water pipes. So in doing that, we thought it would be a good time to redo our cabinetry in the bathrooms. Most of this story is going to be about replacing the cabinetry in the 2 bathrooms at the east end of the house. There's a lot of other things going on in this project, like having to remove a little bit of the ceiling in the basement so that the plumber can get at the pipes to be replaced. And I had to redo a little bit of electrical work. And the showers also got redone. So the first thing to do was to clean out the bathrooms and to get all the stuff out. And then I had to demo the old cabinetry. I did want to save the old sinks. We didn't reuse them, but we took them to the rebuilding center so that someone can find a use for them, because they were still in good shape and they have a nice retro color. So I carefully took out the sinks, which went pretty quickly. They were just held in with some clips from below. And then once the sinks were out, I could demo the cabinetry. I find with demo work, it's not so much brute strength, it's more sort of finesse and putting the crowbar in just the right place. And it's always hardest getting started, and you always start sort of really daintily, but then things get going and it starts to come apart. And I didn't save any of the old cabinetry. So this is the bathroom that goes to the master bedroom. So it's it's a very small master bath. I had to cut out some of the wall for the plumber so that he could get at the plumbing. And this was a little bit messier, but it went quickly. I had to be careful not to damage the pipes behind the wall, but they're steel, so it wasn't too bad. This is the kids' bathroom, which is a little bit different layout in the bathroom, but the cabinetry is very similar. And both of these cabinets were much too low for us. I think they were made so that you could sit at the counter in a chair, which put them really, really low. So one of the things to do was to raise the countertop up higher and to take out the spot where you can sit and fill that with drawers so we have more storage. So I started with a 3/4 inch piece of birch plywood. I spent just a little bit more to get the pre-finished stuff, which I think will help in the end because I won't have to finish the inside. So I cut this down to smaller, manageable pieces and closer to the final size. Usually when I've done projects with plywood, I've glued a strip onto the edge. And I've done this at the end, and I thought on this one I'd try gluing it on before I put the actual box together, which in the end I think made it much easier because I didn't have to do the fitting of the pieces twice, if that makes sense. I could just put the edge on and then put the box together and it would all be flush. So this piece of birch that I'm using for the trim was actually from a tree that was in our yard. So at least there's a little bit of a connection now to the house and what was growing in the yard. So with this, I'm just going to do a simple edge with glue and some pin nails. So now I'm going to make the top piece, and the top's going to be right under the countertop. And it doesn't have to be a solid piece, so I'm going to make a frame with biscuits at the corners. It can be pretty simple. So it's just strips made into a frame. And this will hold the top of the cabinet together and give the top a little bit more thickness. So here's a sped up version of putting this together. So in the length of the cabinet, I've decided I could break it into 2 pieces. I could have a simple box where the sink will go, and there'll be doors on that. And then a second half where we'll have 2 banks of drawers. Because a full length of cabinets won't fit through all the doors in the house to get into the bathrooms. So at this point I can now cut the pieces to their final size, now that the trim is on the front and the frame for the top is made. So I'm getting closer to assembly, and I'd like to cut some dados into the bottom and the top piece. And this isn't so much for strength, although it helps that a little bit. It's more so that when I'm putting the pieces together, they'll fall into place easier. And I'm not trying to glue and nail big panels together by holding them to a line or to a mark I've made, but they will actually fit into a slot and then can be glued and nailed together. I realized at this point that I needed a back And I didn't want to just do a big solid piece, so I made another frame out of 1/2-inch birch for the back piece. Partially to make it lighter, but also so the plumbing can come through from the wall, and I don't have to cut specific holes that have to fall in a precise spot. I can just have a big window where the plumbing can come through. So this is the assembly. I did kind of it's sort of a half stop motion, half time lapse piece where I'm taking photos at specific points along the way. So I think it looks a little smoother than just a time lapse. So I'm just gluing and then using finish nails to put the box together. And the pieces fall into their dado, so it sort of holds together nice and square by itself. And then on the back piece, I can just flush trim the edge, which will make it flush to the box. And once the glue is set up, I can add a few screws, which will hold the piece together really nicely. Now that the boxes are done, the next step is to build the countertop, which will just be a sheet of 3/4-inch plywood, and then I want to have a little bit thicker edge. So I added a strip to the edge, and I can make that a little bit wider than it needs to be, and then cut the piece to the final size, and that'll give me a perfectly vertical, perfectly flush front that I can attach a piece of plastic laminate to. And I can cut the piece to the final width. I did a little research, and it looked like cutting plastic laminate on the table saw is a good way to go. So I tried that, and that worked really well. It's a little bit floppy, and you have to kind of control it, but it cuts really nicely. And you can cut shorter pieces with a pair of metal shears. So with doing plastic laminate, you put the contact cement down on both surfaces, and you let that dry for about 20 minutes or so. Then you can hold the two surfaces apart with some kind of scrap material, like some little sticks like I have here. And starting at the center, you can start to remove those sticks and start to press the two surfaces together. And doing it this way, you end up without any bubbles between those two surfaces. And if you're slow and methodical with this, it works pretty well. And you just keep removing the sticks until you get out to the outer edge. Then I can flush trim the laminate to the plywood, and it fits onto that shape perfectly. I got a piece of sandpaper on a scrap piece of wood, and I can knock down the very edge very carefully. For the big surfaces, it's the same process. So I clean the surface of dust, and I put some tape on the edge that I had just done to try and keep it safe from the glue, but I don't know that this really mattered that much. I cut a paint roller in half on the bandsaw so that I could spread the glue a little bit quicker than with a paintbrush. I let that dry for about 20 minutes. And I did the back of the laminate as well, and let that dry for about 20 minutes. And I cut some longer sticks to put between the two surfaces. I could lay the two surfaces together and hold them just apart and get them lined up nicely. And then start at the center, removing sticks. And at this point, I think I felt like I moved it a tiny bit. I moved the sticks out and started in the center. And then I can start rolling the two surfaces together. And the roller just helps to push the two surfaces together with some force. If you start at the center, you can keep the bubbles out. And you just kind of work the surface until it feels about right. And then again, I can just flush trim the edge of the laminate. And I did just a little bit of sanding right on the edge to knock the burr that was there down. Then it was time to make the drawers. I'm using 1/2-inch birch plywood, and it's finished on both sides, so the drawers won't have to be finished once they're made. So this is just a lot of cutting pieces to size. And in the two bathrooms, in the kids' bathroom, the cabinet's a little bit taller, so I'm going to do 4 drawers there. And then in the master bathroom, it's a little bit shorter, so I'm going to do 3 drawers. And I'm going to cut a rabbet and a dado to sort of lock together to make the drawer sides. And I'm going to cut a dado in the bottom of the sides of the drawers, and that'll be there to receive the bottom. And I've got some 1/4-inch birch that I can make the bottoms out of. And Calvin came out to help with some of the drawers, which was nice, so that he can know now that he helped with the drawers that he uses in his bathroom. This is putting the drawers together. So I'll put a little glue in the dado and rabbet, and then I can nail those together with a pin nailer. And I got a little help putting the drawers together. Now it's time to put the slides on. Half the slide goes on the drawer and half the slide goes in the cabinet. So it's a lot of putting screws in at this point. So if we're putting the piece of the slide that goes in the drawer, it's just a matter of lining it up with the front of the drawer. And I can raise it up a specific amount with a piece of wood. And then for putting the slide in the cabinet, I like to make a jig that's 2 vertical pieces and then some horizontal pieces that line up with where the drawers need to go. So for making the jig, I just divided the inside height of the cabinet by the number of drawers, and then I put a horizontal piece at that mark. And then I can raise the slide up the same amount that I raised it up on the drawer by using the same piece of wood that I used to put the slide on the drawer as well as on the jig. And this worked, and the drawers all went in perfectly spaced, which was nice to see. Okay, so that's the 2 carcasses are made, and the drawers are made, and the tops are made. So that's the basic cabinet. So in the next video, I'm going to put them in the bathrooms, and I'll make the drawer faces, which will make it look a lot better. And we'll put the sink in, which will make it functional. So until then, thanks for watching.